Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, your lower back throbs, a familiar ache from sitting too long. You reach for a bottle of ibuprofen, twist the cap, and swallow two with a sip of water. The ritual takes 10 seconds, a tiny rebellion against the quiet revolt in your own body. You lie back down, but for 99.9% of human history, that little bottle did not exist. No pharmacy, no doctor on call, no emergency room lit by sterile lights. For nearly 3 million years, if something hurt, it didn't just. If even one of your direct ancestors had failed to find a way through that pain, the delicate chain of survival would have snapped, and you would not be here feeling this right now. So how did they do it? It wasn't about being tougher or feeling less. It was about something far stranger happening inside their own minds. A biological trick so profound it didn't just help them survive pain, it helped them weaponize it. Picture this. You are a Homo heidelbergensis, walking the plains 400,000 years ago. You step wrong. A sharp rock slices deep into the sole of your foot. The pain is instant, blinding, a white-hot wire threading up your leg into your spine. In our world, this is a trip to urgent care, stitches, antibiotics, and crutches for a week. In his world, it is a death warrant. You cannot outrun the predator that caught the scent of your blood on the wind. You cannot walk the miles to the next water source. And in a world of razor-thin margins, liabilities get left behind. This was the relentless equation of prehistory. Pain equaled vulnerability. A broken tooth meant starvation. A festering wound meant a fever that cooked your brain from the inside. A prolonged backache meant you couldn't spear a mammoth or dig for tubers, and your children would go hungry. Pain was not a symptom to be managed. It was the herald of your own extinction. The sensation of pain is crucial. It teaches you not to touch fire, to favor an injured limb, to seek help. But if the pain is too overwhelming, it paralyzes you. It traps you in the very moment of injury. A trembling animal waiting for the end, shout its warning, but then allowed the body to quiet the scream enough to act, to run, to fight, to find shelter, to live long enough to pass on the genes of the person who didn't freeze when it hurt the most. And what scientists have pieced together is that our ancestors didn't just endure pain. They negotiated with it. They forged a hidden alliance between body and mind, using rituals, plants, and a psychological lever we are only now beginning to understand. The key wasn't blocking the pain signal. It was changing what the signal meant. The counterintuitive twist. Pain is not in your nerves. Here is the truth that flips everything on its head. Pain is not actually in your tissue. That slice on your foot? Those nerves are sending a signal. Yes, a message of damage. But that message is not pain. Pain is the story your brain decides to tell about that signal. Think of your nerves like a country's telephone network, ringing with reports of a crisis. Your brain is the command center. It hears the ringing, the signal of damage from your foot. But whether that signal becomes the conscious, screaming experience of pain depends entirely on what the command center believes is happening. Is this a threat to survival? Is help available? What does this mean for my future? Your brain weighs the evidence, consults your memories, reads your emotions, and then, and only then, it makes a choice to turn up the volume on that signal into a searing agony, or to turn it down into a bearable throb, or, in extreme circumstances, to shut it off almost completely. This is called the Neuromatrix Theory of pain, and for ancient humans, their entire world was designed to convince their brain that the pain signal, while serious, was not an existential threat, that they were still in control, that they had a plan. Their secret weapon wasn't a chemical, it was context. Archaeology shows us something fascinating. From Neanderthal sites to early Homo sapiens caves, we find evidence of deliberate, ritualistic healing practices that look nothing like modern medicine. But closer inspection shows the man suffered from a severely withered, paralyzed arm, and had been cared for, fed, and kept alive for years by the community. But more telling are the tools. Not just needles made of bone for stitching, but finely crafted awls, scrapers, and probes found near medicinal herb residues. These weren't crude implements. They were objects of purpose and skill. Using them was a ritual. Here's how it might have worked. That deep foot wound would clean it with water infused with antimicrobial leaves. Then, perhaps using a sharpened flint, they might deliberately reopen the wound to clean it deeper, or use a bone needle and animal sinew to stitch it. This process would, by our logic, create more pain. But for the injured person, something profound shifts. The pain is no longer a chaotic, random assault by the world. It is now part of a sequence, a ceremony. The healer's confident hands, the smell of the known herbs, the the focused attention of the group. All of this sends a new message to the command center of the brain. This is being handled. The brain, receiving this cascade of sensory evidence that the situation is under control, can literally dial down the volume of the pain signal. The ritual didn't just treat the wound, it treated the terror. And terror amplifies pain more than any nerve signal ever could. The same principle applied to something like a toothache. Evidence of early dentistry, like a 6,500-year-old beeswax filling found in Slovenia, shows intervention. The excruciating process of drilling or picking at an infected tooth, without anesthesia, was a negotiated trade. The brain understood. This short, sharp, controlled agony you are choosing now. It punishes helplessness. Proof 2. The opium poppy and the placebo before the pill in 1985. They found a clay pot, carefully placed in a grave over 6,000 years old. Inside the pot, not food or jewels, but a dark, crusted residue. When analyzed, it was found to contain alkaloids from the opium poppy. But here was a people storing one of the most potent pain-blocking substances on Earth. They knew that chewing these seeds, or brewing them into a tea, could change the state of a suffering person. But here is where it gets even more interesting. The potency of that ancient opium wasn't just in its chemistry. It was in its ceremony. The poppy wasn't a casual snack. It was a grave good, likely administered by a shaman or healer in a specific context, perhaps during a healing ritual, or to ease the passage of the dying. The brain of the sufferer would be in a heightened, suggestible state, surrounded by ritual, by people they trusted, by the belief that this sacred plant had power. Modern neuroscience shows us that when a person believes a treatment will work, the actual opium poppy alkaloids would have given a powerful chemical boost. But the ritual surrounding its use would have primed the brain to unleash its own pharmacy, creating a staggering synergistic effect. The ancient healer was, unwittingly, conducting a perfect neurochemical symphony to convince the brain the threat was ending, allowing it to safely lower the pain volume. This wasn't medicine as we see it, a pill targeting a receptor. It was ecosystemic healing, treating the person, the community, and the story of the pain all at once. And what researchers found next deepens the mystery even further. It turns out our ancestors' brains might have been physically different in how they processed this whole system. Proof 3. The healing trance and altered states cave paintings across the world. To the intricate geometric patterns in caves throughout the Americas tell a consistent story. Humans have always sought altered states of consciousness. Rhythmic drumming, dancing to exhaustion, sensory deprivation. For pain, this was a nuclear option. When pain was catastrophic, a major burn, a compound fracture, the agony of childbirth, the brain could be persuaded to leave the building entirely. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer tribes observed this. A healer would guide an injured person into a trance state through hours of rhythmic chanting and drumming. In this state, they could undergo procedures that seem unthinkable. The cauterization of a wound with a hot stone, the setting of a bone with brutal force, with little more than a grimace. What was happening? The brain, flooded with the rhythmic sensory input and perhaps aided by psychoactive compounds, was switching networks. It was downgrading the default mode network, the part that creates your sense of self, your body, and it was shifting activity to older, more primal regions. In this state, the pain signal wasn't so much blocked as it was disconnected from the you that experiences it. It was data without a narrative. The brain could acknowledge the injury for repair purposes, but the conscious self was spared the full, soul-crushing weight of the experience by temporarily dismantling the self that was suffering. Recent fMRI studies on expert meditators and people under hypnosis show a similar pattern. They can voluntarily reduce activity in pain-processing regions of the brain. They found the manual override for consciousness itself, all in the name of getting through the night. Proof 4. The social painkiller, perhaps the most powerful tool, wasn't inside the body or the mind, but between people. We are social creatures to our core. For an ancient human, exile from the group was a death sentence as sure as any wound. Conversely, connection to the group was the ultimate survival signal. There is a reason that when we are in pain, we want someone to hold our hand. It's not just sentimental. Studies show that physical touch from a trusted person, a handhold, an embrace, can measurably reduce the subjective experience of pain. It lowers stress hormones like cortisol, which are known pain amplifiers, and can trigger the release of oxytocin, which has analgesic effects. Now magnify that 1,000 times. In a small, interdependent band of 30 to 50 people. Your survival was literally in their hands. Their willingness to feed you while you healed, to protect you, to carry you to water, was your only hope. The psychological relief of that certainty was a painkiller in itself. Evidence from fossil records shows individuals who survived severe, debilitating injuries that would have required months or years of care, blindness in one eye, and a degenerative leg injury. He did not survive in spite of his pain. He survived because his pain was shared. The community's care sent a constant, reaffirming signal to his brain. You are not a liability. You are one of us. We will get you through this. His brain, receiving this signal day after day, year after year, could afford to categorize his chronic pain as a manageable condition, not an emergency. Loneliness, studies now tell us, hurts. It activates the same neural pathways as physical injury. For our ancestors, the opposite was also true. Profound connection could soothe a physical injury. Because to the ancient brain, being safe among your people meant the crisis was over. The body could begin its repair work, unclench, and turn down the alarm. The modern emotional payoff. The ghost in your medicine cabinet, so let's return to you. Lying in your dark room. The ibuprofen beginning its silent work in your bloodstream. It seems like a world away from shamans and trances and Neolithic opium pots. And the very reason the pill works as well as it does. That ibuprofen is blocking inflammatory chemicals called prostaglandins. But a significant part of its relief, studies suggest sometimes more than half, comes from the placebo effect, from the ritual, from your belief in its power. The crisp pop of the pill bottle, the cool glass of water, the act of taking control, the memory of past relief. Your brain sees this familiar ceremony and thinks, ah, the healing sequence has begun, and it releases its own endogenous opioids to help the chemicals along. We have outsourced the ritual to the pharmacy, but the mechanism is the same. The chewed poppy seed for the coded tablet. But we are still, at heart, trying to convince our own command center brains that the threat is manageable. This is why chronic pain, especially when medicine finds no cause, is so devastating. It is pain stripped of its ancient context. It is a fire alarm ringing in an empty building with no fire to be found. Cranks the volume higher and higher, creating a hellish feedback loop. We miss the ancient wisdom. Pain is not just a physical event. It is a story, and the most important chapters are the ones about safety, agency, and connection. Look at your own life. The headache that fades when your partner rubs your temples. The backache that lessens after a therapist explains the MRI, giving the pain a name and a plan. The throbbing tooth that feels instantly better the moment you call and schedule the dentist appointment, before you've even left the house. These are modern, feeble echoes of the ancient pact. You are giving your brain context. You are restoring a sense of control. They conquered it through profound collaboration with plants, with rituals, with each other, and with the incredible, flexible storytelling machine of their own minds. So the next time you feel that ache, before you even reach for the bottle, pause for just a second. Place a warm hand over the spot. Take a deep, slow breath. You are not just a passive patient of your own body. You are the latest inheritor of a 3 million-year-old art. The art of listening to the signal, and then gently, firmly, telling your brain the oldest story there is. We have been here before. We know what to do. This will not be the end of us.